Thanks.
Hey, Martha.
Hi.
Hi. Good to have you here.
Oh, thank you.
Good to have you back.
Yeah,
Martha,
I've been
Martha,
gone for a while to deal with some things.
Okay, well, we're
Martha,
glad to have you back.
Martha, Rich Roberts sends his best.
Say what?
Rich Roberts sends his best. I was with him a couple weekends ago. He's asking about you.
My computer is being scratchy again.
No, I just got a little scratch too.
It doesn't do it for everything.
Oh, okay, interesting. I'm hearing
Hey,
a
Jonathan Adelson here, joining by phone.
Ooh,
So I'll just put it on mute.
okay. I don't know if that's, yeah. Hey, Phil, welcome back from the West.
I'm working on my camera.
Excellent. Good to have you back. And I know we have somebody
Hey,
on
Jonathan,
phone. Is that Joshua?
This is Jonathan Adelson. Can you hear me
Oh,
okay?
Jonathan, we can hear you, Jonathan. Welcome. Good.
It's okay. The audio's okay.
All right. I think, and Telly's here. Welcome, Telly.
Thank you for having me.
We're delighted to have you. Well, we're at the top of the hour. Let me call the meeting to order. And then are there any public comment before we get started? All right, hearing none. Tonight we have guest speaker Telly Tucker and Mark McCauley from the Arlington Economic Development Council. And they're here to talk to us about economic development, the role of technology, and specifically about the JBG Smith agreement that they negotiated about Connect Arlington. So Telly and Mark, this team is obviously very interested in both the macro and the micro. So we're delighted that you could join us and welcome. Telly, I think this is the first time, Telly, you have visited the Tech Commission since you've joined, right? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. I started here in Arlington in January of last year, just before all the excitement with the pandemic, and it's been an interesting first 18 months. But
Right.
we've hit the ground running. We've got some unique challenges ahead of us, but I'm pleased to be here. I've got a great team, great leadership team, and we've got a lot to work.
Yeah, we're getting some feedback somewhere. So what we're going to do, Telly, is we will all go on mute and then we will hand over it to you, okay? Just to brief us. Telly, did we lose you?
Nope, I'm here. Can you all hear me? I'm hearing a lot of background, and a little
Yeah.
feedback.
Can everybody mute, please?
Okay, I think that's better. So before I get started, thank you, first of all, for the invitation. And as Mary mentioned, my name is Telly Tucker. A little bit about my background. I have 15 years plus in experience economic development all around the state, from Hampton Roads to Southern Virginia to Richmond, Virginia, both at the local and state level. It's my pleasure to serve as the economic development director. For those of you who may be unfamiliar with economic development, we have 7 divisions, about 50 employees within the department. We oversee everything from business attraction, retention, business intelligence, real estate development, small business support, cultural affairs, which involves our arts community, our convention and visitor services team, which is similar to a CVB. We also have a group that focuses on, I think I mentioned small business. We do a business in Espanol program as well. And then we have an internal teams that focus on marketing, communications, and all of our operations functions, including HR. I want to introduce one of our division directors, Mark McCauley, who leads our real estate development group, and allow him the minute to introduce himself.
Yes, thanks, Telly, and thanks everyone for having us this evening. As Tully said, I run what we call the real estate development group within AED. Primary focus is working with our businesses and property owners to bring investment into Arlington. In practice, that means working a lot with planning on some of the regulatory environment, but also a lot of special projects, whether they be real estate related, but also I'm a veteran of the Connect Arlington process and worked with Jack for many years on that. So I have been involved in the dark fiber world for most of my career here. I've been here about 10 years.
Thanks, Mark. So what we thought we would do maybe is just provide some background information on, first of all, what the role that technology plays in an economic development organization, specifically Arlington. And then I'll let Mark talk a little bit about maybe summarize some of the deals between in the JBG Smith deal, and then we'll talk about how our forward thinking around our the development of a tech ecosystem and the role that Amazon plays and a few other things. So we'll maybe provide hopefully some context for you all for the next 10 to 15 minutes, and then give you all an opportunity to ask some questions at the end. Hopefully, if that sounds okay.
That sounds great. Thanks,
So,
Tully.
okay. So in economic development, particularly here in Arlington, you hear the county board and you hear many people talk about innovation. And what does that mean for us in economic development? Well, innovative organizations do require a certain amount of technology infrastructure if they're going to be considered what's cutting edge or reliable, secure, and ultra fast. If we're going to be competitive from a business attraction standpoint, we have to have cutting edge, innovative technology and infrastructure. So specifically within Arlington, we're home to a high concentration of cybersecurity companies, government contracting companies, and they're all critical to our nation's security infrastructure as well. So we, years ago, following the Base Realignment Closure Act and sequestration, we made a conscious effort to diversify our local sector base away from primarily just federal government and contractors associated with the federal government to making sure we include a diverse portfolio of companies, to include things like emerging technology, blockchain technology, IoT, cloud computing. These are just a few of the types of technologies that we wanted to seek companies to diversify our sector base. And so we've been doing that over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, very intentionally, such that when you have shifts in the macroeconomic environment and you maybe have some sectors that are not doing so well, you have other sectors that prop them up. So as we seek to create these clusters of emerging technologies, there was an opportunity that came up for wide-scale deployment of 5G communication. And we've been hearing a lot about 5G, finding out what opportunities they are. We've seen examples of companies that are looking for that type of connectivity, that to develop their new intellectual property and technology, and to have places where they can test that and bring that to market. So if we're looking at an environment where it's I would describe it post pandemic, it's even worse, but even prior to the pandemic, it's a really, really competitive environment. Fierce competition between economic development offices and just cities and counties in general who are competing for business, not to only recruit new business, but to retain the business that's there. And one of the things that you constantly have to think about in economic development is, how do we maintain a competitive advantage? What assets do we have that would attract people here and to keep people here? And so beyond our office buildings, companies are looking for, among other things, probably the first is talent and the employees that they're going to need to continue to be successful. And we were delighted when CBRE last year named this region the #2 region in America for tech talent, just behind the New York area. And so a lot of people don't necessarily think about the metropolitan area as a hub for tech talent, but indeed it is. And so in order for us to continue to maintain that talent as we're developing our educational institutions are developing world-class talent here, and the investments made with the Amazon deal into the New Virginia Tech Innovation Campus and what George Mason's doing and a number of others, we want to continue to make sure we're well positioned to build on that growth. And so the demand for those employees and the latest technological advances are almost become expectations of things that Arlington needs to be thinking about and staying ahead of the curve on. So that hopefully gives you a sense of the kind of the macro focus around why technology is important, specifically to Arlington economic development, and how we're trying to focus on the growth of both private sector and public technology infrastructure, which enables us to recruit and retain the companies that are good for our market and to help continue to diversify the sector base that we have. I'm going to let Mark talk a little bit about specifically some of the terms of the deal and how that came to be with JBG Smith, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit about Amazon's arrival and how that helps build on some of what we are thinking. So, Mark, would you like to take it away?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Telly. The first thing to know is that the county received an unsolicited proposal by JBG Smith relative to a broader initiative that they were looking into relative to smart cities innovation and creating a 5G at scale condition in national landing to build upon, obviously, the real estate portfolio and their success attracting with the county and with the state Amazon, as well as other, as Telly mentioned, many other efforts to fill their office buildings and to fill their residential buildings. So as with any case, when we receive an unsolicited proposal, we go through the process of looking at what the broader values and benefits are. Does it align with county policy? Does it make use of resources for their intended use? And then what is the nature of the deal? And is it a good deal for the county, for lack of a better term? So when we started this process, many months before the board ultimately took action, we went in with a number of key, what I'd call sort of foundational elements. One was that the deal should have broader economic development impacts. Second, that the transfer or leasing or licensing, however you want to couch it, of any assets did not move us from a position of abundance of assets to scarcity, and that those assets that would be transferred were put there for their intended use for economic development. And third, that the county was fairly compensated beyond even the economic development benefit, which is still the primary focus, but that there was a helpful discussion with internally, and then a series of negotiations with JBG Smith on what that asset would be worth. So what we ended up with and what the board took action on was an IRU, or indefeasible rights of use, for conduit and fiber assets for essentially a 99-year term, a 75 plus 24. It's important to note that the deal really began to formulate around the conduit and access to the conduit. The conduit had fiber in it, but the conduit was really and figuring out which conduit could be transferred, and then which conduit the county would retain for future use. And so the deal, as presented to the board that they voted on, allowed us to transfer one of four conduit along the Connect Arlington trunk line and any associated spurs or laterals, but also maintain a conduit for county use. And that's important to note, that's above and beyond conduit use for county use for things like the traffic signals and public safety and those sort of things. So this is what we call the DTS conduit versus the economic development conduit. So we were very, we believe we held true to that standard of maintaining flexibility and opportunity in the future, while still transferring an asset that was put in the ground for the very purpose of economic development. Other elements you'll see if you've read the board report or looked at the agreement, there's the national landing conduit, There's also the Pentagon Run Along Bridge conduit, which were related to Connect Arlington. Same concept, maintaining both access and opportunity for the county while providing those routes to help the National Landing assets connect out of National Landing. And as I'm sure you're probably aware, the negotiated fee was a one-time upfront fee, although the one-time is really in two separate stages relative to construction of one of the Long Bridge Pentagon Run of $3.5 million. And that was a extensive negotiation on what the value was of an asset that, quite frankly, is very difficult to value. We valued things differently in the public sector than the private sector does, when usually it's about what revenue is produced off of it. So that was a very interesting series of negotiations, but we think we ended up with a really good value for the county.
And Mark, would you also just share relative to the value that the monetary value we got in comparison to what was invested at the time we put the fiber in the ground?
Yeah, so one of the way we got to the value was a number of different ways of looking at a value of an asset like that, and one of those was what was the value that we had already invested in this area of the assets being transferred, and that was roughly over $3.1, $3.2 million around there. So we got more, even if it's in present terms, roughly the same recovery of assets. We also looked at what it would cost JBG Smith to replicate that, and we wanted to make sure that we were providing them enough of a gap where they would accept our compensation offer for the assets, because quite frankly, we didn't want them digging streets and creating redundant assets, but also that there was enough of a tie to the asset value for them was really their ability to not have to do that construction, and also the time that they were saving, speed to market, and being able to do eventually what they announced, the deal with AT&T of having assets in the ground and not having to wait 9, 18, 24, 36 months, however long it takes for some of these things to get done, to be able to get those assets in place.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And I think one of the points of clarification that we like to make sure people understand is that this is a portion of the county's excess fiber that was put in the ground for economic development purposes. And so one of the things Mark mentioned earlier during his comments was one of our goals was to be keen not to go from a position of abundance to scarcity. And I think we maintained and accomplished that goal in the sense that we have still excess fiber to be able to service future economic development needs where elsewhere in the county if we need to. And so that was a key goal for us that we maintained through the entire negotiation process. So as we think about, why this 5G smart scale, why a fiber IRU in National Landing, why with JBG, a big part of that also has to do with Amazon. As Mark mentioned, Amazon, JBG was part of the recruitment team that helped win the Amazon deal, certainly because they control a lot of the real estate in that area, as where Amazon's being built. They had an interest, and then their investment, their $25 million investment in CBRS spectrum technology, all played a part in their unsolicited proposal. And so thinking about, as we kind of shift gears here and talk a little bit about what's happening with Amazon and how the momentum created with Amazon continues to spur future technology growth, and spinoffs and new entrepreneurs in the tech ecosystem, we believe that it made a lot of sense to look at trying to leverage the energy, the momentum, and the investment that has been made in that area. Prior to the pandemic, we were expecting there to be a strong tail of companies that would locate near the Amazon HQ2 once it became firmly established, similar to what occurred out in Seattle with their first headquarters. And while the pandemic was unexpected, The reality is that the first phase of HQ2 won't actually open until 2023, and the second phase is expected to be finished sometime around 2025. So in recent months, interest from out of our market has started to increase, particularly in national landing, and we expect that to continue as the health situation improves from the pandemic and as HQ2 nears closer to completion. We think that there are going to be opportunities for new technology companies that want to have access to, a 5G ubiquitous connectivity in the national landing area, and that want to be in reasonably close proximity to Amazon for the purposes of developing new technology that might take advantage of that connected 5G. So just a little bit of an update on where Amazon is. A lot of people are curious if they're kind of on pace to meet their desired target dates and goals. To date, they've hired over 3,000 employees actually at HQ2, with another 2,700 open positions currently being advertised. The greatest concentration for the jobs that they've hired and for the positions that are open are in software development. As a reminder to many people, because the deal, it's hard to believe that the deal is more than 2.5 years old now. The centerpiece of Virginia's proposal was a statewide investment in computer science and related programs to more than double Virginia's tech talent pipeline. And of course, Virginia Tech and George Mason were a big part of that, and the investment to build out those two campuses in Arlington. The National Landing Innovation District, there was a lot of conversation around an innovation district and why is that critical. And we believe that the board was really excited about the advancing of an innovation district to create an environment for this tech ecosystem to continue to flourish, and for entrepreneurs and other Fortune 100 companies to want to be in close proximity to where this type of innovative partnership, public-private partnership, is going on. And there are we had done some research on where other innovation districts are in the United States, and there are some around college campuses and some around major metropolitan areas, but none of our research found any of this size and scale. And we think that's a differentiating factor for Arlington, in really a way that we can continue to create a competitive advantage and be leading edge. So, one of the questions that, people ask us, and one of the ones we considered actually when we were doing this deal was, is this model something that could be replicated or followed by any other user? And I think I think it's a perfect example of a project that could be replicated elsewhere. We are having, it's no secret, we are having conversations with George Mason as well about creation of an innovation district. Does it have to look the same or be the same format as the one in National Landing? No, not exactly. But we do think that the model that was created by what JBG Smith brought to the table does make a lot of sense. And Mark can talk a little bit about some of the obstacles in the past of why kind of one-off dark fiber agreements with individual companies, we hadn't been able to bring any of those to fruition in the last 5 years for numerous reasons, and I'll let him talk about those. But we think the model that was created by the JBG deal had some really unique components that were unique to them because of the scale and the breadth of and the control of the real estate that they own, and then too their investment in the CBRS spectrum technology that I mentioned before. So let Mark talk a little bit about some of the challenges that we had over the last 5 years, or obstacles, if you will, in reaching other dark fiber agreements. Because a lot of people said, well, you had the asset has been in the ground for quite some time, and this is the actual first deal that has come to fruition. And I think there's some reasons why. So, Mark, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, and I'll try to be brief. I know that folks want to maybe ask questions and things like that. So we do have the existing dark fiber licensing structure board-approved rates and license agreement that was essentially structured to lease individual strands of fiber along the entirety of the Connect Arlington ring. And at that time, with the goal of not some fear of whether someone would lease a lot and squat on it or not, not utilize the fiber, we limited both the times of that term, a 3, 5, or 10-year term, and then also the number of strands per applicant. And we've made some adjustments over the years, but that system, that structure, basically in place. We had, I would say periodic but significant interest from businesses and property owners, as well as some telco providers, but could never really close the deal. And I'll say that for one, the rates we think are still below market. I don't think it was a per mile rate issue. We never got a lot of pushback on the actual rate of the fiber license. The real issue that we ran into was that from starting with businesses, even very sophisticated users of fiber that are very big data driven organizations still don't fully know how to utilize or want to know how to utilize dark fiber in and of itself. They need end-to-end solutions. So they need that service, but just giving them access to dark fiber, everything from how to get into their building from a physical standpoint to how to light that fiber in a efficient and redundant and cost-effective way, really is where a lot of the issues, as we talked with companies and we had very specific discussions with them about using the Connect Arlington fiber, that's where it all fell apart. And they essentially fell back on what they know, which is to call the big guys and sort of say, what can I get for this level of service? And the big telco companies, or the medium ones in some cases, were able to provide those end-to-end solutions. We also had a lot of interest from what I'd call the medium-sized telco companies, ones that are typically leasing dark fiber as part of their business model. They don't own a lot of fiber. They're connecting routes. Again, the pushback we got was, one, just the risk of taking on an agreement with the county, the mismatch of how a county looks at a legal agreement and what a small business or medium business looks at in terms of its risk, and also the persistent problem of the lateral. How do you get into buildings? Who's going to maintain that lateral? Property owners, for what it's worth, are the commercial markets. Commercial community is pretty lagging in terms of innovation. I'll say that. That's not necessarily a criticism, but it's more of a reality of the conservative nature of that business. And they don't want to own laterals either, because they've worked for, they understand their model, which is that Verizon or Comcast comes into their building and builds the lateral and maintains it. So we're really seeing a mismatch between sort of the county's ability to provide that end-to-end solution and who may be interested in the dark fiber. So this opportunity, as we began to analyze it, began to solve some of those problems. It created the bridges of who was going to implement that, who was going to work with the telco to provide the lit service, who was going to provide the real estate, who was going to provide other things like the antenna network, and that our dark fiber could best be utilized as one piece of that puzzle rather than trying to solve it all.
So I think we've done a lot of talking. Hopefully that gives you a little bit of contextual background and some history on how this came to pass, why it's critical or critically important to our economic development strategy, and how we believe there are going to be some opportunities to leverage that asset for future economic development growth and wins, which is ultimately, again, why the asset was put in the ground. So why don't we stop and pause here, maybe take some questions from the group if there are specific things that you would like for us to touch on in further detail.
Right. Open it up to commission members. Questions? I'll go first. I can't see any. If someone has their hand up, I don't see it at the moment. Mark, we have met.
Yeah.
Two questions. One, was there a digital equity component to this deal as well?
So I will also have Telly and answer that, but I'll start off by saying one of the drivers of our negotiation of the compensation was to get immediate resources that we felt were fair, but also that would be provided immediately with the direction from the manager that there was a desire to build up a resource bank for digital equity. Now, the question of what that would be used for is still with the manager, right? But what we did is we provided resources that we think provide a significant dent, never providing all the resources needed, but provide a good start to that effort.
Okay. Okay. And I'll come back with one, but Jonathan, you've got your hand up. Go next.
Thank you. I was just going to say this is a great deal. Is there a little echo or no? You're not hearing it?
I can hear you fine.
So I just want to congratulate you on this. I think this model does work for other types of uses of the dark fiber with the limitations that you have on having lit fiber. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to make this work, and I'm thrilled that you're doing it, particularly in National Landing. And what's really exciting about it is that they have Virginia Tech coming in, and I'm hoping that they will start to teach wireless engineering, et cetera, and they can use that 5G network to kind of prove out different opportunities and to teach people about it. So it's just a great deal all around. And it does pay back the county for a lot of the expenditure that it made for this, finally.
And we still retain half of it, which I always joke. JB just reminded us of every meeting, which is that you want us to pay for all of it, and you're keeping half of it. And we said, well, that's the deal.
And you mean just half of that little region, right? Not for the whole.
Yes, this is just for National Landing, the trunk line there, some associated spurs and laterals, obviously the handholds, and then, as I mentioned, also a relatively small but critical piece of the Pentagon Run Long Bridge stretches that get you back into Roslyn.
That's still a pretty small part of the overall network in a sense.
Absolutely. Yep.
So the value of the whole network at way beyond what the county paid for it, if you could actually monetize that. I guess my other question is, are other vendors able to use the fiber? There's the JBG deal with AT&T exclusive.
And again, I think we push JBG Smith, although it's hard to put in a legal agreement trying to predict. What we wanted to do is we wanted to be an infrastructure provider, but not try to negotiate something that was going to get into their operations model when they're still trying to figure it out. But we did certainly put in a strong push, and we think we do believe JBG Smith as the real estate owner wants competition, right? They want to provide the best possible service to their tenants, not out of some benevolent good, but because it's going to be a highly competitive marketplace. And while they own a lot of real estate, other people own real estate as well. And to attract the best companies with the best talent, they're going to have to show that they offer the best amenities, in this case, the hard infrastructure of service. So as we understand it, it's not an exclusive deal, meaning it's not everyone has to be in the AT&T network. What it is for AT&T is an ability to get in as an early provider for the for the service. I don't tell you if that was makes sense to
control it. But I think it's great that you encouraged it. And of course, people have their own devices from different carriers, and if they could, it's in their interest, I think, to make it as open as possible.
Yeah, they've communicated to us that JBG Smith has no interest in becoming a telecommunications provider themselves, and that they are willing to work with any and everybody who was willing to work with them. It's in their interest to do so, and we think that that it makes a lot of sense for them to do that. So,
All right. Any other questions from the commission?
I have a couple, Mary.
Yeah, go ahead.
This
Hi,
is
Mike.
Sorry, I'm audio only because
That's
of
all
my
right.
location.
It's all
But
right.
I'll fire off a couple quick ones. 99 years is an extremely long time for a technology agreement, and I'll just say on quick background, the largest one I ever did was as a CIO for a federal agency. It had a 10-year duration and a $2 billion estimated value. But 99 years just kind of completely floors me, especially on a first go at something. Can you explain what the value of 99 years is? I don't doubt that the requester proposed it, which means they'd love to have it locked up for 99 years. But what about like a 2-year test period or a 5-year period or renewable? 99, the only other thing I've ever heard of that was 99 years was the Hong Kong lease by England.
Yeah, I can answer part of that, and part of it is about where this fits in the infrastructure investment strategy for JBG Smith and now their partner. This is still a piece of the puzzle. They're going to put many multiple mores of millions into infrastructure and continue to build a network over the next several years and beyond. And so part of this is about an investment payback strategy or requirement that if they put under $10 million into the ground, they want to make sure that the county 10 years later doesn't say, well, we changed our mind. And they're left with the only pieces they put in, which don't complete the puzzle. And that they know that over the many generations, they're going to have to recycle this. Obviously, the useful life of fiber and conduit is long relative to some other things, but it's still limited. The other thing I'll say is this is pretty typical. This is part of a technology deal, but once again, we're just providing the infrastructure. We're not providing, I would say, that we're creating a piece of infrastructure. This is much more common in real estate, where a ground lease is typically 75 to 99 years, where someone's building a building on land they don't own, but they're leasing, and needs to be able to depreciate that cost and then justify new investments as that asset needs significant reinvestment. So I can tell you it was a question that was asked of the board by the board of us as well. We understand the question and understand that 99 is a long time, but this is not just a license. What we looked at it is, and with our partners in DTS, this is not just a fiber deal. This was really an asset deal. And part of that flows into how we'd look at sort of say if we were ground leasing, let's say for Courthouse Plaza, which has started off as a 99-year ground lease and is now down to less than that. But so that's part of the answer.
Yeah, two other quick ones, if I might, while I have the floor. One is, does this mean JBG Smith is now the gatekeeper to those fibers? And although you've spoken as if it's automatic that any tenant of JBG Smith could have access to this, while non-tenants of JBG Smith could not, does JBG Smith have the right to grant or withhold access to this fiber to their tenants?
To withhold to their tenants, or to withhold to well, one is the fiber that was transferred is just part of the fiber in the ground, so they do not have the ability to control how the county uses its excess fiber, nor do they have the ability to restrict.
My question wasn't about the county. My question was about, have we now made JBG Smith the gatekeeper to this fiber? Whereas Arlington used to be, not very successfully, but at least we were the gatekeeper. Now they are, right?
Well, I would just answer that in terms of this is providing another telecommunication options to buildings in Crystal City and Pentagon City, National Landing.
But only the ones owned by JBG Smith, correct?
No, they as part of their business model, they will happily provide access to other buildings. Yeah, there's a separate LLC. There's a separate LLC set up. So when we say JBG Smith, obviously we talk about JBG Smith. This came out of that, but the agreement is actually with an LLC that was set up to for this Smart Cities innovation, which part of AT&T. Okay. I can tell you AT&T's motivation is not to limit their customer base. So them bringing on yeah.
Thanks. That clarifies that to me. And then the last one, again, from the skeptical column. I regard Arlington as being a little underdone on regulating technology. And when I hear Innovation Center, I often hear a general reference to relaxing or waiving policies. I have difficulty finding any policies to waive. So could you identify for us, I'll say for the record, the policies on the books in Arlington now that the economic development people think could generate more economic development if we waive them?
So let me start with that, Mark. As far as policies that are on the books, they have not requested the waiving of any at this point. Where we are in the process is we are trying to identify both public and private uses that would benefit from the 5G access to the 5G technology. And if there are specific, say like if there was a test case or a test bed that wanted to request permission to have to do something out of the ordinary that isn't currently allowed, they would have to go through the process just like anybody else would to ask for either a special exception to be made or a special provision to be made. So
I hear you,
there
and I'm
there
asking
are
for an itemization. I'm asking for an itemization of policies because I know of no such things that people would ask to waive. And my current fear is that in the name of innovation, we're completely enrolling citizens in public spaces into surveillance activities with not enough regard for their privacy or the security of that data. So innovation zone to me connotes some kind of a relaxation. And I've been in the business of trying to strengthen the policies that would protect the citizens from the enthusiastic uses of innovative commercial sector people. I know we need them for our economic development. I'm not against them. I'll say they have a very solid track record of innovating for economic gain in the short term at the expense of security and privacy costs in the long term. And the latter fall to the citizens and to the country, not to the investors in the innovative company.
I appreciate that feedback and that point of view, and that's something that I know, Jack, you and your team also have an eye toward that as well.
Right.
Jack,
so could you produce a list of the current policies that would be candidates for relaxing in the context of an innovation zone, please?
No.
No, you can't, or you're refusing to?
I'm not sure, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking me from a list of, I mean, we have lots of regulations on the books, but I'm not sure. I mean, to say that we need to produce a list that could potentially be.
If I understand correctly, an innovation zone, by definition, is a place that certain things are going to be allowed that wouldn't be allowed in other places, as a test case.
It could be.
I don't agree with that at all. That's not the case. So I'm not sure where you're going with this, but those are discussions that take place at the FCC of what we can do and what we control, say in 5G, and when they stand up, they have definitive policies on what we can control and what we cannot. If we think that somebody's not surveilling us now on polls, they're checking where you go, what you do, and that's happening all the time. If you use Facebook, you're doing facial recognition. So that's an argument. I understand the argument, but I don't think it has validity in this discussion.
Okay, but Jack, obviously the FCC rules pertain nationwide, and we're talking about creating an innovation zone specific to part of our municipality. And the question is, what are the features of that?
I think we've been quite clear.
It's kind of
clear on what we do.
Yeah, Jack, I think, and Mike, let me see if I'm translating. If I'm not hitting the mark, let me know. I think the question is, I have a company and Telly's meeting with me, and Telly outlines and says, look, we have this special innovation hub, but these are the guidelines in order for you to play in this sandbox, right? And so the question is, are we there yet? Do we have guidelines for the where kind of the right and the left is? Say you can experiment all you want, but here are the guardrails. Maybe we don't have those, but just curious about what's the price of admission to get into that innovation sandbox, Telly. Does that help? And Mike, am I reflecting correctly?
I think you're reflecting it correctly. There must be something about the innovation zone that makes it more attractive than the parts of Arlington that are not in the innovation zone. And I'm just curious if we can itemize them.
Currently,
there
are no additional guidelines that exist within the innovation district that don't exist outside of the innovation district at this time.
Okay. Right. Okay, that's very helpful. Jonathan, you've been patient. Thank you.
I was just going to respond to say that often these long-term IRUs or leases are not that atypical in the world of dark fiber in commercial agreements. They're often very long. It's almost like a purchase agreement for that long of a term. But given that there still is opportunities, I understand it, for other uses with that same fiber as well as other fiber throughout the county that isn't part of the deal, it seems like a reasonable way to go since it's consistent with commercial practices.
I had another. Thanks, Jonathan. Since you all have already, and Mark, I'm sure you just did a happy dance because you have been involved in this so long, and to have this, finally be there at the where you proof the concept, significantly. Do you think now, it's always the first one jumping in the water? Do you think now that you have the first one, do you see any more people understand what the model is, how it could work? Have you seen an increase in interest in people asking about, quote unquote, this type of deal?
I can start and then Telly and also Jack can wait. I think during our due diligence for this, we talked to a lot of people that were talking to us about other ideas they would have. I would tell you, I think everyone on the property owner side is, in terms of replicating what JBG Smith did exactly, I think are excited, intrigued. They're not in the same position as JBG Smith. I think JBG Smith has been very open, not just to us, but to others, that their CBRS spectrum would be at obviously a return would be available to others if they don't own real estate holdings, but they also own significant properties in Roslyn and obviously Alexandria, where they have the CBRS spectrum. So I think it may be replicated outside of Arlington first. Everyone mentioned the Virginia Tech campus in Potomac Yard, Alexandria. And yes, I think at some scale, I think it could be replicated in some of our other urban commercial clusters. Maybe look different because it won't have the critical mass of the same real estate ownership. But the idea of using the dark fiber and creating a partnership with the private sector, telco, looking at real estate, looking at who controls that real estate, and then utilizing the county's asset, dark fiber, for really what it's best intended for, which is as that piece of infrastructure that connects it all. I think is a model we'll start to see. I can't say immediately, it's only been a couple of months and it's been over the summer in a pandemic, so we haven't got a lot of meetings on it. But I think commercial real estate in particular, when facing tenants, are lemmings, right? And when one succeeds, they all then try to replicate it. So I wouldn't be surprised if both regionally and within Arlington, we see other commercial properties saying, how can I offer that level of service in my building as well? And what do I need to do to invest in that?
To do that. Okay, yeah. John, and then Jonathan, you might have another comment, right? Or is your hand up from?
Sorry, that was left over.
An old hand. Okay, no problem. John?
Thanks. So two questions more from a policy standpoint. One specifically for this deal, and then one more broadly for economic development. First, for this deal, are there specific aspects of county policy that helped guide you as you evaluated this unsolicited proposal? And if so, could you point them out to us? Because I haven't been able to find them. And then two, more generically for economic development, what county policies exist today that guide you on from a technology perspective for economic development? Thanks.
Telly, you want me to take a crack at the first question? I think you're probably better suited to take the crack at the second. Sure. I think the policy, and if you talk about policy with a little p, right, board actions that create precedent. Clearly what we relied on when it came in, when we spoke with the manager and talked with the board at the appropriate times, was the policy directive of why the investment was made in the first place, in this additional conduit that was put in for the purpose of economic development. So this wasn't using assets that was put in for a different reason and we were shifting. This was for its intended use. Now its intended use was a different concept than we thought maybe 5 years ago, but it's still the same use of licensing dark fiber for economic development. So that really was the continued backstop of sort of that part of it.
And sorry, just to follow up on that, where was an intended use when the board authorized Connect Arlington in the first place?
Yes, particularly for this conduit. Connect Arlington was, as Jack can describe, was obviously an effort to control our own destiny with franchising agreements and to provide better ITS on. But the third conduit was maintenance. But the third conduit was what we call the economic development conduit. that 864 was specifically denoted for economic development. Now, again, we thought that would be towards licensing strands to businesses or to property owners, but this was just a different model to realize that policy.
Sure. Could you send that that reference to that board action just for my benefit?
Yeah, we can track down the additional board report. And Jack, maybe you probably have, we can give it to you. It was a public action when the board authorized the investment in Connect Arlington.
Yeah, one thing should be pointed out, and Mary sat on this group, and so did Jonathan, is that the manager put together a broadband commission to identify what the ills of way Connect Arlington was situated and set up. And many of the recommendations that Mary and that group made exhibited in what came out in this agreement, such as the duration of the license. It takes businesses don't, as Mark has adequately stated, they're not going to make a business deal based on a 3-year lease or a 5-year lease. They got to have some substantiality in the lease. The idea that much of the wording of the licensing agreements would put all the liability on the person applying for it. And Mary, you remember this when we talked about it with the broadband commission, that we all said that ain't going to work, and we got to change that.
That's right.
And so this agreement, if you look at what we do with this, is we didn't allow sub-licensing because we were fearful that somebody could make money off of this, And those things appear in this agreement, and I think those were, as Mark has well stated, small p policies, but we were inhibited by that, hobbled. And I think this agreement really sets a tone for how we can go forward. And to somebody's original request, yes, we're getting a lot of interest because ears are picking up and they're saying, wait a minute, this makes a little bit more sense than it did when he first presented this. Kelly, I'll let it hand off to you.
And before you go, I noticed Phil has a question that probably you're best suited to answer. He said, what's the county's total investment in Connect Arlington to this point?
The exact dollar
Roughly?
amount,
Roughly?
escapes me at this point in time. But we know this when we and our friends from Comcast. I know Kevin's on the line. Knows this. We looked at our neighboring jurisdiction in Alexandria and found out how much they were going to have to pay per building to connect using the INET, as they call it, institutional network. And so we did the arithmetic and said, okay, let's see what we could do if we applied that to what it would cost us in the county at that level. How could we realize that cost? And we did that in 2013. Is it that far ago? Yeah, 2013. Seems like
Wow.
Years ago. And we found within 5 years we'd equal the investment. What we placed in the Connect Down was equal in terms of the savings. Now, Kevin will argue the case, and rightly so, that you didn't give us a chance to sharpen our pencil. We probably could have done something better for you. But at that time, that's what we were driven by. The exact amount, it came from a variety of sources: public safety grants, ITS, intelligent transportation grants. Ground was open. We took advantage of plugging a hole with conduit. So I can get you that number, but I don't have the exact number in front of me, and I hesitate to throw a number out until I get that. It seems like not only yesterday, but it was over 9 years ago, Mary.
Wow. Yeah, and I remember you waited until we opened up because one of the most expensive was digging. So you just waited until some Department of Transportation or Public Works had to open, and then you laid fiber.
Yeah, the feds didn't help us at all. I mean, we built the Connect Arlington piece, which was designed. The manager will tell you if he was on this call. We did this portion of it for the pure purpose of inspiring economic development. So this was excess fiber that we were making available. And to put it in, we put in 864 strands of fiber. We had to replace these handholds that Virginia Department of Transportation had put in. And those wonderful people charged us for every handhole we pulled out and expanded.
Yep, I remember that. Yeah.
You remember that?
I do. I remember that. That was really?
Long history, Mary. Sorry to go on like.
No, and I'm Telly and Mark, I'm sorry. Normally we don't keep our guests almost an hour, but this has been so interesting. And Frank, did you have any question before we go on?
I didn't quite get the second answer.
I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry, John. I apologize.
Which was in more generic terms, what policy currently exists that guides economic development in the technology space from the board?
So I wouldn't say there's a formal policy. If you're if you're kind of referring to how we decide which types of technologies we want to recruit, retain, attract, that's more the that's more of an economic development strategy. It's unique to each director or each business investment manager that comes into the space. What we try to do is build on what we're seeing by way of latest trends in the market, which ones are projected for growth over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And as you might imagine, as technology evolves, they too, our strategies evolve with them. So I don't know that it would be very difficult to define a specific policy associated, that we could stick with for long term, because I feel like the evolution of the technology, we have to be nimble with it if we're going to take advantage of opportunities that are out there. For the benefit of, I think one of the previous questions, I went ahead and pasted the definition. It was included in the board report of innovation district as we defined it and agreed to it. But really, the areas of, getting back to John, your question, the areas of focus in national landing have been primarily around cyber, big data management, cloud computing, edge computing, IoT. There's probably one more I'm missing, but we're looking for technology firms that are um, are developing, new uses for those concentrated sectors, in those concentrated sectors, and they can be a wide variety of sectors. I mean, they're everything from, we had headlines a while ago from a major port transportation company, CMA CGM, which is a French-owned company that's developing new, what they call Industry 4.0 transportation automation technology, using everything from additive manufacturing to to cyber. So it really depends on what opportunities we become aware of and whether we think they make sense and are a good fit for Arlington based on the talent that we have here, the infrastructure we have here, and are they projected for growth. So I'm not sure if that helps answer the question that you're asking.
No, it does very much. And this is more of a comment, so no response required. But Mary, I think one of the things we think about on this commission is, while the specific technology may change over time, principles and values never go out of style. And so I think, there are people playing in all of these spaces who are more responsible than other players. And I think I would like to see an economic development policy that specifically and intentionally recruited those more ethical and responsible players, because I think that more aligns with Arlington's community values. And I think that's a prime example of why we need a comprehensive plan element to speak to this kind of space. Because right now, staff is left to do the best job that they can without this guidance, and I think this is a good deal, and I want to commend you on it. But I think from a policy standpoint, we're failing staff by not providing them that framework.
Yeah, thanks, John. Agreed.
Hey, and Mary?
Yes. Yeah, Mike.
This is Mike. And can I add, at the risk of stating the obvious, and this is pretty simple, I would use the term policy for something that's written down for use prospectively. The idea of looking at past board actions and inferring what the policy is useful, and it's often part of a case review type thing. But when I say policy, I mean something written down that says what we intend to do and be in the future.
Mm-hmm. Good clarification, Mike. Thank you. Frank, do you have any questions before we move on? Any comment?
Actually, no additional questions, but just a historical observation. I think just wanted to point out that the commission had been involved and I believe weighed in on the original Connect Arlington proposals at the board in support, and then the additional dark fiber proposal as well. So, and this is exactly, I think, what we envisioned. We didn't know what form it would take. I think we had hoped that, maybe other government agencies, educational institutions, or businesses would come make use of this, and this is exactly what we had hoped would happen, and it's happening. So I want to say kudos to the county for hanging in there and making this come about. And I do believe, as far as the I think that the template for what dark fiber, what was, ran through the county attorney, and I think the board did sign off on what the terms would be. So there was a policy, and it sounds like that's what was being followed. I think it may have been modified some because of perhaps your commission, Mary, the broadband commission, yours and Jonathan's. But there were policies that were established at that time.
Okay. Well, Telly and Mark, thank you so much. And you now are the marathon guests because we kept you a full hour. So my apologies. But it was really, we needed the time, and we appreciate you you being so generous with it. So keep up the good work.
Thank you for having us.
It's really, really good to meet you, Telly, and good to see you, Mark. So you take care.
Great. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night. Bye. All right, Frank, we will move on to you with the legislative update.
All right, I'll try to keep it brief. Our friends across the river at the FCC will consider a notice of proposed rulemaking to examine the Wireless Network Resiliency Cooperative Framework, the FCC's network outage reporting rules, and strategies to address the effect of power outages on communications networks, which is very relevant given what happened in Texas this winter and what happened in Louisiana more recently. So the FCC is taking a look at those resiliency issues. The FCC is also going to consider a further notice of proposed rulemaking that would impose obligations on gateway providers to help stop illegal robocalls originating abroad from reaching U.S. consumers and businesses. The FCC is also seeking comments on 3 issues related to broadband in multiple dwelling units, MDUs, including revenue sharing agreements, exclusive wiring deals, and exclusive marketing pacts between landlords and ISPs. The FCC wants to determine whether these effectively block out competitors, impact price or quality of service. Current rules prohibit exclusive access deals. I think that's where I'm going to end it.
Wow. All right. That was a short one tonight, Frank.
Yes.
All right. And Martha, robocall just for you.
Yes.
No, he hasn't had a robocall comment, and you're here, and he does. So, and Jack, I know Richard is on vacation. Do you mind giving us anything for DTS that you want to update us on?
Not much, but we're concentrating on continued move towards more mobility. We're very concerned that what we're seeing with the COVID is going to come back, and we're recognizing that our workforce to hold it together. And we're seeing it across the board. You may have saw the board meeting last night, and in terms of what police are facing in terms of shortages and human services, libraries, parks, and we're fearful of that happening with the county workforce. And so as much as we can make sure that people have access anytime, anywhere to the services they need to conduct the business to serve the constituents, that's our goal, and that's what we're trying to work on. And also keeping well in mind that cybersecurity is critical. It's not a question of how we're going to get, if it will happen, it probably will, and we've got to make sure we're doing everything we can from the end user up to secure our enterprise. So we continue to work on that. That's all I got. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Jack. And John, thanks for the report, the GAO report on contact tracing. That was really good.
Yep.
That was really good. Really highlighted a couple of critical issues around privacy and security and trust and all those things. So that gave us and those of you who haven't looked at the link, it really does reinforce some of the things we've been talking about. So thanks for flagging that, John.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring, right? Angela sent out the minutes, and we do not want you to think we ignored their request about action items. Angela is meeting with the web mistress to make sure that we redo the website so people can see some of those more easily. And so we should have a report for you by next, hopefully in October. It'll look a little different, and then get feedback from all of you. So any comments, any corrections, additions, deletions to the minutes?
I
Okay.
move we adopt them.
Hey, Mary,
Thanks.
this is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
I don't have any verbatim recommendations, but I would like to elaborate on the front piece and then pick up on your comment. That is, I think we should go back, I'll say, just to put a stake in the ground, 2 years and itemize every request for information we've made, itemize every rendering of advice we've made, either requested or unsolicited, and then keep track in like old business what its status is. And then that would be an ideal place to just put the URL for whatever we're talking about, so that people don't have to understand the structure. But
right.
But I think the problem is, like, I just got at least 2 no's today, like asking for information about this and that. It strikes me as not a good way to retain free talent in a commission when you're asking, I think, legitimate questions in the purview of the commission and getting told, no, you can't have the information, or no, there is not such information. I'd say, we're going to find that a large percentage of our requests don't attract any response whatsoever.
Well, indeed, we will be restructuring, so we see that easily. Just so you know, Angela has 4 different sites that we're trying to integrate at the moment. So I think we will. It should be easier. Frank and I had a look at it with Angela showing us, so I think we will make that easier and be able to track, Mike, to your point.
And I understand, Mary, and I think the integration at the back end on those 4 sites would be less important if the items showed up in the minutes with the URL next to them. Wouldn't care where the URL went as long as it got to the document.
Yep, got it. Got it.
I have one edit for the minutes was from an action item, which is that I requested that we get a briefing on the deal, and we got it. So I think that should be reflected on the action items from last month.
Okay, you did, John. You did.
We asked. We got it. It was great.
You ask and you receive, right? And excellent. Yeah, and that was really it was helpful. Okay. Can we make that any heartburn about making that change to the minutes, and then we can move forward? I'll entertain a motion to adopt as amended.
So moved.
Okay, second.
Second.
All right, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
I'm hearing an aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, minutes from August approved, and we will meet again October 27th. Seems far away, but it'll be here sooner than we think. Virtually, I think the county decided at one point we were going to go face to face, but now we are virtual for the foreseeable future. So we'll be back here in Teams October 27th. Any other announcements before Jackie?
Yes, an announcement, and that is that the Civic Federation will be hosting a presentation by the county on the Safety and Innovation Zone project at its October 12th meeting. And while some of the details are still being finalized, I believe the presenter will be Dr. Miller.
Okay, October 12th. And what time do they meet? It's virtually, right, Jackie?
Yes, it's still virtual. I think
roughly
it starts around 7.
Okay.
But usually the business part presentations are more in the 7:30 to 8 time frame. Okay. And that's one of the details we haven't nailed down because I don't know the order of presentation yet.
So it'd be just on the CivFed site on the.
It will be, and will be. Our newsletter deadline is like the 30th, and no, you actually have to register, same way you do for the Committee of 100 and everything else.
Okay. So we need to register if we want to listen in.
Yes, and I'll send you the invite for the registration, if
Okay,
people
great.
are interested. And then there's going to be, so it's going to be Dr. Miller, and then there'll be 15 minutes of questions that are pre-identified, some of which have been similar to questions asked here and other places. And then there will be 15 minutes from members, delegates. And that's why you have to register, is we have to know who are the delegates and who aren't
Okay,
for asking questions or for
understand.
voting.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any other announcements before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Frank?
Yeah, just wanted to point out that Telly provided the concept of an innovation district definition in the chat. So for those who,
Okay, good. Yeah, thanks, Frank.
we want to make sure that makes the
To
minutes.
the minutes, yes. Thanks, Frank. Absolutely. Good, good. All right. Well, everybody I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Thank you, Phil. Second?
Second.
All right. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
I think this might be we were early tonight, my goodness. So I'll see you all on the 27th, and have a good month.
Yep.
Take
Thank
care,
you all.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Night all.
Bye.
Bye.
All right. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.